Hey guys, Kraig here, and welcome back to another GameMaker Studio 2 tutorial about combat. Last time we talked about melee attacks that can hit one enemy, and this time I'd like to talk about melee attacks that can hit multiple enemies. So let's jump into it. First things first, we take a look at our player here. If we remember right, we wrote some code where if we click our left mouse button, we create a hitbox somewheres in the circle around us in the direction of our mouse. And in our enemy, if it collides with the hitbox and sees that, hey, the person who created this hitbox is the player, we're going to take some damage. And then at the end of this, we go ahead and destroy the hitbox. So it hits one enemy, gets destroyed. That's the end of that. In order to hit multiple enemies, like let's say, let's say you're playing Call of Duty Zombies. There's a whole swarm of zombies after you, and you have, well, okay, this didn't happen in Call of Duty Zombies, maybe Left 4 Dead. Okay, Left 4 Dead, and you bash them. You hit multiple zombies at once, they get knocked back, they take damage. How do you get this to hit multiple enemies like that? Well, one pretty easy way is to actually take advantage of the hitbox itself to keep track of what it's collided with. So you notice we have our creator and our damage variables here. We use that to pass some info to the enemies that were getting hit last time. Something we can do is actually pass some info back into the hitbox from the enemy. So the enemy here, when it collides with the hitbox, instead of immediately taking damage, could say, hey, actually add me to the hitbox to like a list of objects that have been struck. The hitbox then, when it goes to destroy itself after this alarm is up here, could then say, okay, I've got this list of things I've collided with, now we're going to go through and do damage to each of them. And that's exactly how we're going to try to implement this. So I guess first things first, we need to put a list into our hitbox. Instead of just calling it list, let's actually give it a more descriptive name. We'll say collided with. So it's going to be a list of the instance IDs that we collided with. And that's ds-list create, like so. The next thing we're going to do is come back to our enemy, and we're going to reevaluate what's going on here. Okay, so we've collided with a hitbox, that's this event, and we've checked the hitbox came from the player. If it did, rather than just immediately taking damage like this, what we're going to go ahead and do, let's just comment this out for the moment so that we don't lose what we were doing. We're going to add ourselves to that list. So we're going to say ds-list add other dot collided with, that's the list, and we're going to add our own ID. In an effort to prevent bugs and make sure that we're not adding ourselves to this list multiple times and taking multiple points of damage when we shouldn't be, we're actually also going to check that we don't have ourselves in this list already. So if ds-list find index, and this is again the other dot collided with list, and the value is our ID. If that is equal to -1, which indicates that it couldn't find that value in the list, then we're going to add ourselves to the list. So this works out such that we never add ourselves to the list twice. Yeah, that would cause issues because we'd take damage more than once from one hitbox, which doesn't make sense. So, okay, we've added ourselves to the list. That's good. Now we come back to the hitbox, and we come back to the alarm where we destroy the hitbox. What we're going to want to do before that is go through that list and deliver some damage to all of the things in the list. So, luckily in this case, the only thing that can be in there is an enemy, which has a predictable health variable, and that's in this init health script. It's the current HP variable. In an effort to kind of standardize this a little bit, such that we're only ever doing damage with the correct variable names, we're going to add another script here. We're going to call it take damage. And what this will do is allow us to specify how much damage. That would be our argument 0 there. And we're going to do the damage to the calling object using this current HP variable. So we'll subtract that. And then we'll check if the current HP is less than or equal to 0, we're going to destroy the calling object. So okay, so this script is written to affect the calling object. That means up here in our hitbox, we can't call that script directly. We need to call it as if the enemy was calling it. And the way we can do that is because our collided with list is going to contain IDs. We can say with, whatever the ID is, and then inside of this, call that script. So then it's as if the instance with that ID is calling the script. It's not the hitbox calling the script. So let's go ahead and snag those IDs because we're going to need them in order to pass into this with statement. So for var I equals 0, I is less than ds list size, and we give it that collided with list. So it's going to loop the same number of times as we have items in our list, which is, even if it's 0, it's going to work correctly because it won't loop at all. We'll wrap up our with statement inside the loop. We want to grab the ID at position I from the list. And the way we do that is we could say var collided ID is equal to collided with, ds list find value from collided with at position I. So that's going to grab us that ID. And then we're going to give the collided ID to the with statement. And then here, our take damage, because the damage is already set in our hitbox, we just pass that variable in. Actually, we have to set it as a local variable first, because now, remember, we're in this with statement. We're acting as if we are the instance with this ID. So if we say damage, it's going to look for a damage instance variable on that instance. But they don't have a damage variable. We have the damage variable. So if we set it to a local variable first, local variables still work fine in this context. So we can actually pass in the local variable. That's a little bit confusing. It almost I almost put the wrong thing in at first, and then we would have had to debug live, and that's never fun. So if you guys don't understand that concept, totally fine. Leave me a comment, or look it up in the help area here, like what a with statement is really doing. Yeah, it'll make sense once you grasp that with basically takes you out of the context of whatever object you're currently in and puts you in the context of the object that you've stuck in here. But yeah, this should work now. So if we go ahead and add a few more enemies to our room and we cluster them together, if we scooch over in the corner and hit all 3 of them at once, we should see that we can get rid of all 3 of them with the number of hits. They should all be taking damage. So here we go. There you have it. We can hit multiple enemies at once with one hitbox now. So yeah, let me just show you the code one more time. The hitbox is here. We added this to our alarm. Let me get this out of the way for you. We added this code to the alarm, which is working on this list here. We put in the create event, and then up here in our enemy hitbox, we changed this code. This is what we had before when it was one hitbox to one enemy, and we instead are adding our enemies to this collided with list. Yeah, kind of a small change, but you saw what it can do for your game. Very useful for any kind of game where enemies hoard together and you want to be able to, hit them all with your claymore or whatever. So yeah, there you guys go. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next one.